Your portaband's gear case is a central component that serves several important functions. It supports the bearings, gears, and spindle that drive the blade pulley. It houses the blade pulley and acts as a blade guard. The back of the switch handle attaches to it. The rear blade guide and the bumper also attach to it. There are a number of problems that can occur, causing the case to be replaced. The total failure of a drivetrain bearing or gear can cause damage to the gear case. A seized bearing may spin in the housing, causing the opening in the housing to wear oversized. This results in a sloppy fit and play for a new bearing. A seized bearing or a failed gear can cause the housing to crack. If the saw is dropped, the gear case can be cracked or a portion might be broken off, especially around the blade pulley and the rear switch handle. The threads where the rear blade guide and the bumper attach can be stripped out, making it so these pieces can't be firmly attached to the saw. Replacing the gear housing is a more advanced repair, but you can do it yourself, and I'm going to show you how.
Hi, I'm Mark Socha.
Do-it-yourself repairs like these are easier than you might think. From lawn machines to cordless grills, kitchen mixers,
Outdoor grills.
our how-to videos walk you through each repair from start to finish. So doing it yourself means never having to do it alone.
Let's get started.
We'll begin by removing half of the rear handle assembly. While it's possible to finish this repair with this piece of the handle still attached, I find it's easiest to just simply remove it and get it out of the way. So there's 2 screws here and 2 on the back. Now remove the 2 screws that secure the blade guard. Now remove the 4 screws that secure the gear case to the motor. Now use a rubber mallet to separate the gear case from the motor. With the gear case split from the motor, now I can begin removing the gear case grease. We'll replace this later when we reassemble. With the first layer of grease removed, now I can remove the intermediate gear. To remove this gear, I'll just kind of wiggle it and turn the blade pulley. I'll clean up as much of this grease as I can. A little brake cleaner can be helpful to clean the gears. Now remove the blade pulley, starting with the hub. Beneath the hub, there's a retaining ring. I'll remove that next. A nylon washer. And now I can remove the blade pulley. Beneath the blade pulley is the drive sprocket and the chain. I'll lift this out of the way. And one more nylon washer. Now remove the worm gear shaft, the worm gear, and the bearing. The bearing's held in place with a couple of screws. I'll use a screwdriver to carefully pry this assembly out of the housing. With the worm gear assembly removed, I'll go ahead and clean this up, again using some brake cleaner. Inside the gear case at the bottom of this opening is the second intermediate shaft bearing, and I'll remove that now. This one can be a little challenging to remove. I have a pair of pliers that'll grab the inside race on that bearing, and these will allow me to pull it. If you don't have a tool to do this, you can always simply just replace that bearing. Now remove the blade pulley shaft. It's held in place with a single screw. Next, I'll remove the bumper. Now remove the rear blade guide assembly. last piece I'll remove from the old gear case assembly is the model number tag. It's held in place with two very small bolts. Now we can install our new gear housing. I'll begin with the model number plate. These screws are self-tapping, so they can be a little challenging to install. Now install the rear blade guide assembly. You can use a screwdriver here, but if you have an impact driver, it'll be a little easier as these are self-tapping screws going into unthreaded holes. Install this first screw just part way. I'll get the screw on the other side started. And now I'll finish up this screw on this side. Now I'll reinstall the bumper. The screw in the guide block is already tapped, but the other two are not. So I'm going to install the screw in the tapped hole first, help us line everything up. I'll leave it a little bit loose, and now install the other two. And for these two, I'll use the impact driver. Line up the last screw. Now reinstall the blade pulley shaft. The shaft gets secured with a screw, and the screw needs to be torqued to between 95 and 135 inch-pounds. Now reinstall the worm gear assembly. Before I put it into the housing, I need to apply some new grease. First, I'll apply a little grease to each of these open bearings. I want to pack that into the bearing. I'll also go ahead and put some on the gears. In total, I should have about 1.5 ounces of grease on this when I'm done. I'm going to add just a little extra. I'll just coat that onto the shaft. About like that. Now install this assembly into the gear case. Clean up the excess grease. Now I've installed the worm gear assembly, but I'm going to leave the retaining screws out at this point. When I install the intermediate shaft, I'll probably need to pull this gear assembly out just a little bit for clearance. Now we'll get the intermediate shaft ready for assembly. Again, more grease in the open bearings and on the gears. I didn't mention before, this is Milwaukee's Type G grease. And again, I should have about 1.5 ounces of grease on this assembly when I'm done. Now install the intermediate shaft assembly back into the gear case. Once the intermediate shaft's in, I can reinstall the screws. Now pack a little more grease around the gear and the bearing to finish up the gear reassembly. Now reattach the gear case assembly to the motor assembly. Now I can reinstall the blade guard. There's two different screws used on the blade guard, one with a locking washer and one with a shoulder. The one with the shoulder goes on the front of the saw, and this is because the front of the saw moves back and forth when you tension the blade. Now I'll replace the blade pulley and drive assembly. First, the lower nylon washer. Next, the drive gear and chain. Now the blade pulley. The second nylon washer. And the retaining ring. And this assembly gets covered with the hub. Now reattach the first half of the handle assembly to the saw. And two more screws on the back half. These again are self-tapping screws going into an unthreaded casting, so I'll use the impact driver to install them. And I'll finish up by installing the other half of the handle. Before I secure it in place, I want to make sure that all the wires are tucked out of the way so they don't get pinched. Also make sure the switch is aligned with the housing. Be sure to check back often for new videos and expert advice. If you found this video helpful, give us a thumbs up.